Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's project showcase with India Foundation for the Arts. As you know, India Foundation for the Arts is an independent, not-for-profit that implements projects across practice, research, and education in arts and culture in India. Over the last 29 years, we've implemented over 800 projects, leading to films, publications, performances, film, etc. And the outcomes of these projects are something that we share in our project showcase at each event. Today, we have a very special sharing from our exploration category of our arts practice program. It's a lecture performance. And I'm sure that you're all really looking forward to experiencing this. A couple of house rules before I hand it over to my colleague, John Xaviers. If you are attending here on Zoom, please do use the chat box to share your responses, your comments on the performance. If you'd like to share or ask questions for today to the panelists today, do leave your questions in the Q&A box. And if you're watching on Facebook, leave your comments and questions there, and we'll bring it over to Zoom. A special announcement for today's event, do have your sound on. If you'd like to grab your headphones, please do that now. Now I'll request John Xaviers to introduce today's project and the presenters. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Menaka. So today we have Suvani Suri and Amarnath Praful with us, who will do a lecture performance as a part of the Explorations project under IFA's Arts Practice Program. The Explorations category is for artists to play around with new ideas that are risky or unprecedented. The lecture performance is called Anatomy of a Song, and it is based on the song We Shall Overcome. We shall overcome. And its various renditions from different parts of the world at various points in history. So before I invite Suvani and Amarnath to make the lecture performance, I'll briefly introduce them. Suvani Suri is a Delhi-based sound artist, and she was one of the artists in the 4th edition of Kochi Muziris Biennale. And Amarnath Praful is a visual artist who works with the medium of photography, and he teaches at NID. So please join me in welcoming Suvani Suri and Amarnath Praful to start their lecture performance. Over to you, Suvani.
Would you sing We Shall Overcome with me, please? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand.
An anonymous collective emerges in the comment section across geographies and cultures.
Unified by a logic of the algorithm.
Unified by a logic
of several
algorithms.
algorithms. The idea of we, the collectivity that it summons or captures, a universal imagination. But at the same time, the we is haunted by the problematic or the puzzle of the we, of who belongs to the we, and what binds the collective body together.
Every time the song has been resung, it carries with it the question, what are we? When are we? Just as much as it asks, what is it that needs to be overcome? The dynamic range, registers, and intensities of the song carry the force of the questions. A we that is unsettled by the moment in which it is sung, heard, every repetition of which reveals the iniquities and tensions present in the moment itself, a concept that is well illustrated in the here and now of the pandemic, of several wars, civil rights movements, natural catastrophes. A we emerges.
Upon close examination of various YouTube versions of We Shall Overcome and the comment section, one identifies that the comment is used to ascertain and identify with a certain collective. There is no location or event for these collectivities, but it is spread in the internet's non-place and time. Some of these solidarities remain accidental and impulsive, while some of them are informed and articulated. Many others dissent with one another. There is no consensus except in the fact that the song speaks to all, the all. How does a song become so malleable such that it begins to contain within itself all voices and intentions? Voices that speak of historical, nationalistic, existential, and personal contexts, at times agreeing with and often opposing each other. Drifting through the accumulations of comments on a single version of the song, the We Shall Overcome BBC Television Theatre, London, June 5, 1965 version, sung by Joan Baez, uploaded 8 years ago by John 1948 7B. The YouTube account John 1948 7B has 3.66 thousand subscribers. This upload has 1397313 views, 17,000 likes, and 715 comments, the most recent from yesterday.
A litany of numbers open up a vast field of thinking about the uncountable excesses. Firstly, the singular moment. The singular moment in a song that precipitates the subjectivities evoked by the act of listening, the moment of the rush translated into an utterance that seeks to round up the excesses of all the feelings felt, and yet it doesn't do enough.
Emilia Jane 7, 2 years ago, edited. This song is so beautiful, and her voice. I love the part 153. Wow. 4 likes.
Secondly, the universality. The universality of that which is expressed as a personal and a particular utterance, but that leaks out into a collective and universal pool of experiences that a song induces with each listening.
Michael Yoder 1 year ago, these days especially, it's everyone's anthem. 45 likes. Tara Leigh Royer 2 years ago, this is the song we need to unify us as a global community. Politics and borders be damned. We need to help one another and overcome this. No likes.
Lastly, the sight of the comments as one that is not only abounding in personal histories, people who go into the musicophilia moment and churn out their memories about the song, but also composing itself into a dialogic space, generating discourses about the moment of the song itself, a sight of historiography against the history of the song. And the comments that turn into conversations.
Today I was feeling a bit sad about this crazy situation in the world, and I remembered this song. Thank you, Joan Baez.
Feel exactly the same.
See, I'm glad I'm not alone.
Me too. We shall overcome.
Going through my hair and chair, this world is a desperate state. We need peace, not war.
I have many
I have
wishes.
many wishes. One of it is to sing one time in the real life.
Life together with her. My girlfriend's name is Joanna.
Heiko Mayer, 2 months ago, 2 likes.
The field of the we, as we see, it is a temporal field. It is a field of virtual collectivity and emergent subjectivity, forming over time and time again, around the locus of a song, around the act of listening to a song from another moment, but in the now. The we, however, was not always that. It has had a long and fascinating journey that began with an I. The gospel song, I Will Overcome Someday, a hymn by Charles Albert Tindley, was first published in 1900, was adapted into the We Shall Overcome. 2 separate songs from over 100 years ago. The lyrics from the hymn, I Will Overcome Someday, a hymn written by Charles Tindley in 1903, and the melody from a traditional African-American gospel song called I'll Be All Right, came together in 1945 to 46 during a labor strike at a cigar factory in Charleston, South Carolina. Zelphia Horton, a folk singer and activist from the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, first heard the song at the factory where she was struck by the moving simplicity of it and how one picketeer, Lucille Simmons, would sing it very slowly and powerfully. Simmons is credited with changing the lyrics from the I to the we.
Like the preamble of a constitution, we the people, an utterance that occurs before the people are mandated into citizens. The lucidity of the musical structure A B A B A B affords an I becoming a we in the moment of it being sung and heard. Lucille Simons picked this up. A week containing deep histories of the song, personal biographies and experiences, deep connections with the song, resonances, reverberations, the moment that the singular personal turns into the universal collective. All of that is felt in that moment. The claim over what is felt is seen in the comments. And then we move from the will to the shall. A year after hearing the song, Horton taught it to Sager when he first came to visit the Highlander Folk School. Horton and Sager published the song in his newsletter People Songs in 1948. By this time, the will had morphed into a shall.
What does a shall do instead of the will? Sager writes in his autobiography, "No one is certain who changed will to shall. It could have been me with my Harvard education. But Septima Clark, a Charleston school teacher who was director of education at Highlander and after the civil rights movement was elected year after year to Charleston School Board of Education, always preferred shall. It sings better."
It sings better?
Yeah, let's try. We will overcome.
Overcome. We will overcome.
We
We
will
will
overcome someday.
overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome.
Overcome.
We
We
shall
shall
overcome
overcome someday.
someday.
Yeah, I think it sings
It's
better.
better. Yeah.
There is a force, a velocity in the shal. The sh becomes stronger and thicker in a choral refrain as voices, tonalities, timbres, and textures add to it. The V in the will remains thin and precarious.
The predictive qualities of the will and shall also now have to be cut open here. Both signify a tense, a future tense. Does shall and will signify different futures, or are they different imagecies of the same future? Shall, must, and will are all modal verbs. Modal verbs are used to express an obligation. So let's move to the legalistic. In the legal contractual terminology, both will and shall convey different strengths of obligation. Traditionally, juridical conventions dictate that will, when used in the first person, that is, I will or we will, conveys an obligation, whereas shall, I shall, merely a future intention. Conversely, when used in the second or third person, you will conveys a future obligation, while shall, you shall, or he shall imports compulsion and obligation. The legal terminology, however, does not state what happens in the case of an ever shifting collective. A collective first person will and shall. We will, we shall. But it seems that the obligations take the form of an intention, not a necessity. Going back to how will, when used in the first person, conveys an obligation, whereas shall merely a future intention. Speaking of legalities,
Seeger, in his autobiography, says, "In the early 60s, our publishers said to us, if you don't copyright this now, some Hollywood types will have a version out next year like, come on, baby, we shall overcome tonight." So Guy Frank and I signed a songwriter's contract for the song.
I had known the time, I'd used it when I sing Jacob's Ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. So it was not unknown to me, but Frank Hamilton and Guy Carawan, I hope you get the spelling right.
This is Sagar talking about the changes that he brought into the musical structure of the song, which he actually copyrighted.
And they got into these subtle variations in rhythm. Rhythm is such an important part of African American music, as it is, of course, in African music. A song isn't a song unless you get the rhythm right. You might have the melody exactly right, but if you don't have the rhythm right, you don't have the song right.
Verse 2. Overcome.
What does it mean to overcome? At the personal and at the collective level. How do we overcome?
Why do we have to overcome? What do we overcome? And when do we overcome? When do we overcome? And when will we overcome it?
And when
What
will
do
we overcome?
How do we overcome?
What do we
When
overcome?
will we overcome?
How much longer do we have to keep overcoming?
It's a bit exhausting. The comments seem to start to lay out strategies to overcome. Let's look at some of those now.
Terry Doyle, 4120, 1 year ago. We shall overcome. What exactly is it you want to overcome? No likes.
Nikhil 186, 2 years ago. We shall overcome COVID-19, but only if we come together, all of us. 6 feet are apart, of course, in brackets. We will get through this, he writes. 1 like.
Dustin J. Claw, 2 months ago. The situation and current events of the world that go on and on every day. Things that I am bombarded with almost every day, just through the media, often makes my anxiety go haywire. This song really helps me to comfort me in those times. And when I feel so overwhelmed by the current event, the news, the general media, and social media. 2 likes.
Sim Clary 5281, 4 years ago. What are we overcoming?
Mind like yours.
Hate.
Listen to the words.
It's obvious. We will
We will
overcome
fighting, hate and separation from each other on a soul level.
Injustice and inequity. At Yashke 1964.
We sing to overcome a system that does not care about our small folk, doesn't care about those that are lesser, doesn't care about those of us that are beaten down.
To overcome seems a feat in its totality, aimed at the world at large, the sad anthology of living through the times. The times vary in context, history, and moment, but grief remains. Perhaps it is to overcome the act of overcoming, to reach a frontier.
To overcome from the world
itself.
Combined with a skepticism for utopia, a desire for another world, the act of overcoming, the recognition of a struggle, and yet the futility of overcoming. How many times more shall we overcome?
So yesterday, in response to the story on Instagram that shared this event, a friend pointed out very pertinently, I'm still quite mad about how a frail Pete Seeger performed the song for an Obama inauguration event, and then our dude started to drone hospitals and kids. It's used even in a Karan Johar film.
Yeah, it is this part of the song, this word in the lyrics set, which also starts to scatter in translation.
In Hindi, it becomes Kamyab, Hum Honge Kamyab. An adaptation by Girja Kumar Mathur, most popularly performed in patriotic contexts, school assemblies, from actually what a lot of us might even remember. But how does Kamyab shift the register of the overcome? What else does it end up producing? Amar, what about in Malayalam?
Yeah, Suvani, so I think there are 2 prominent routes that the translation has taken in Malayalam. The first one is ringing something like Adijeevikyum Naam, Adijeevikyum Naam. Here it's interesting. The word Adijeevikil is key. Adijeevitham or adijeevikal means to survive, and in a strange sense, to hyperlive, adijeevitham or adijeevikal. The other line is Pradirodhikum Nam, Pradirodhikum Nam. Ee dukkangale. We will resist and we will resist all this sadness. So it goes like, we shall overcome, we will resist from this sadness. The one that is lesser utopian version is Nammal Munnerum Adivegam. Nammal Munnerum. We will go forward in a very fast, hyper fast, or with great velocity. It's something like survival versus progress versus sadness. I think the song was a standard in schools, group singing avenues and opportunities, and the song had a resurrection when the 2018 floods happened in Kerala.
Isn't that when Usha also performed it?
Yeah.
So in Bengali, there are many versions as I understand it as well. Please excuse my Bengali pronunciation. So Bengali folk singer Himang Biswas translated it into Amra Korba Joya, which was recorded by Bhupen Hazarika. Now Bhupen Hazarika had heard the song during his days in America, and he also translated the song to the Assamese language as Omi Home Gofal, translated to We Shall Succeed. Yet another version is there in Bengali. It's called Ek Din Surje Bhor, literally translated as One Day the Sun Will Rise. Translated by Shivdas Bandyopadhyay, it was recorded by the Calcutta Youth Choir and arranged by Ruma Guha Thakurta during the 1971 Bangladesh War of Independence. And it became one of the largest selling Bengali records. From victory to success, to the sun rising, to transcending, an obstacle to be overcome, or a going beyond, some kind of an imagination. A range of synonyms flood the interpretations, a scattering happens, a fragmentation in the modes of what has to be done, of what has to be overcome. What remains consistent though is the melodic structure, an elevation in the melody before it arrives at the someday, an elevation indicating somewhere else that hasn't yet been located. And with this, we come to the someday.
And we come to the refrain. A chorus is not a refrain. A refrain may or may not be a chorus. A refrain is structurally repeated. The repetition can also cause a glitch. Is the someday glitched?
It seems to be a future horizon that keeps slipping away. The someday. When will the someday arrive? Or is the everyday the someday? The future in the now, always already relevant, but forever elusive and never really arriving. The comments yearn for a utopian someday, an ideal which is rid of the tragic. Let's read some of the comments. Wick Girl 2 years ago. Is the song of the moment? Oliver Roger. But we could not yet walk hand in hand. This moment, last moment, the next moment. This is a song for every moment. Asterisk AX. We will someday, however far it is, we shall overcome. Asterisk KX again. It is exactly except for we are not afraid. We are afraid. But we shall not be overwhelmed by afraid. Let us keep our steps towards to overcome someday. Dreaded world rights. We will be free. The confusion between the everyday and the eventual moment, redemption and entanglement, relevance and urgency, hope and futility. In the face of the historical impossibility of utopia, a lot of comments try to assert that this is the song of the moment, recognizing the moment as superior to a skeptical, hopeful future utopia.
Temporal nows that keep formulating a hypothesis. Alan Badiou, in his preamble to the communist hypothesis titled What is Failure, writes, my examination of the peculiarities of the notion of failure in politics represents an attempt to define the generic form taken by all truth processes when they come up against obstacles that are inherent in the world in which they operate. The underlying formalization of this problem is the concept of point. A point is a moment within a truth procedure, such as the sequence of emancipatory politics, when a binary choice, do this or that, decides the future of the entire process. We have to realize that almost all failures have to do with the fact that a point has been badly handled. Any failure can be located in a point, and that is why any failure is a lesson, which ultimately can be incorporated into the positive universality of the construction of a truth. Before that can be done, the point over which the choice proved to be disastrous must be located, found, and reconstructed. Using the old terminology, we can say that the universal lesson of a failure lies in the correlation between a tactical decision and a strategic impasse. But if we abandon the military lexicon, we can say that the question of the point masks the fundamental statement. When a truth is at stake, failure cannot be theorized on the basis of tautology. We have a magnificent theorem about worlds. Whatever they are, the point of a world form a topological space.
He continues in the preamble to communist hypothesis, which means in ordinary language that the difficulties of a politics are never universal, as enemy propaganda are. As enemy propaganda states along the lines of, quote, your communist hypothesis is nothing more than a chimera that cannot be put into practice, a utopia that has nothing to do with the real world, end quote. This would always have us believe in order to discourage us once and for all. Its difficulties are caught up in a network in which it is possible, although often difficult, to know their place, to know what surrounds them, and how to approach them. Badiou writes, we can therefore speak of a space of possible failures, and it is within that space that a failure invites us to seek and to theorize the point at which we are now forbidden to fail. So I'm just wondering, is this song then perhaps a site of possible failures, an archive of those failures? Like in Ouroboros, the we, in a way, has been held in a loop. And that loop stops it from actualizing. Is it a mere coincidence that the emergence of the loop of the song collides with the emergence of the nation state? That investigation, however, is for another time.
About the melodic structure also, about this part, the elevation that starts with the overcome, turning into the bridge to return home in the we. Coming back to the we.
Coming back to the we. In 2016, a lawsuit was filed against the Richmond organization and London Music by the We Shall Overcome Foundation. Yes, there is a foundation called the We Shall Overcome Foundation. And the suit that was filed was in a bid to have We Shall Overcome declared free for all. The We Shall Overcome Foundation group was found by producer Isaias Gamboa, who was denied the permission to use the song in a documentary on the history of the song. The legal campaign to free the song argues that a change like will to shall is patently trivial and insignificant. So, just to remind us, the change from will to shall has been claimed by Sager's copyright. So, Isaias in the lawsuit writes that a change like will to shall is patently trivial and insignificant. The words are at the most grammatical variations of the future tense. Folk music does not observe such grammatical formalities. Rather, folk music is filled with lyrical expressions that do not conform to grammatical rules or norms.
So what then is an anatomy of a song? We don't know yet, but maybe we can speak about what it is not. It is not.
Yeah, it is not a genealogy of a song that moves through different historical junctions as a folk song, gospel, worker rights song, civil rights song, associating itself with various movements such as the civil rights movement as a tune of resistance, protest, and solidarity, while also voicing a nationalist, militaristic, and occupational function with the several translated versions.
Neither it is a historiography of the ethical legal framework of copyright issues that the song exists in. The sheer futility of the examination of the legally contested histories, provoking questions about transference, the beginning of the beginning, the cover from the reprisal from the remix of the remake of the cover.
It is also not about the scale in terms of geographies and time that moves from the internet and the personal to the public and the universal.
It is certainly not necessarily about the musicality and the personal memories of first listening to the song, accompanied the first attempts at reproducing the tune while learning to play the piano,
The notes
are
are,
abounding.
however,
From the I to the
I
we,
to the we,
the
the
back
back
to the
to the
I,
I, in the
in the
I
I who
who
believe,
believe,
there is
there
a
is
trace
a trace
of
of a
desire.
desire that haunts. Instance 1. Author Mark Allen was living in Czechoslovakia when the country was seeking to end communist rule. In his book Velvet Revolution, Allen wrote of We Shall Overcome. In Prague in 1989, during the intense weeks of the Velvet Revolution, thousands and hundreds of people sang this haunting music. Now, the music was sung in unison in Wenceslas Square, both in English and in Czech, with special emphasis on the phrase I do believe. This song's message of hope in the Velvet Revolution gave protesters strength to carry on until the powers that be themselves finally gave up hope forever.
Instance 2. On September 2nd, 1957, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. visited Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, the site of a meeting between Zilphia Horton and Pete Seeger. Dr. King delivered the main speech that day, honoring the school's 25th anniversary. As part of the meeting, folk singer Pete Seeger got up with his banjo. He plucked out a song he had learned at Highlander and led the audience in singing it. Later that day, Dr. Kim found himself humming the tune in the car. There's something about that song that haunts you, he said to his companions.
There is something
About
about that
that
song
song that haunts
that
you.
haunts you.
One day, someday, someday, someday,
Thank you, Suvani, and thank you, Amarnath, for such a energetic and very layered lecture performance. Thoroughly enjoyed. And as I was listening to your lecture performance, I was thinking that the anatomy of the song is the kind of a certain kind of surgical procedure that you're doing on the song is that of semiotic anatomy, in the way that you're cutting up the syntax. And it's through parsing the syntax that you're revealing so many layers as within one line. So for me, uh, when you're cutting up that syntax, it's also about cutting up time. Cutting up time, not historical time, but time as in diachronic time, in the way the song would proceed. The linear time is getting cut. So there's the element of non-linearity that you are playing with in your performance, and that is synchronicity, and that synchronicity is coming alive through the act of lecture performance. It's today, the moment when you're performing is the moment of that synchronicity. So when you make this dialectic between someday, as in the utopian 20th century Marxist fantasy of utopia, when you think of today, that today is activated by the performance, the performative aspect of that energy, and the way that your time yourself and the moments when you're speaking together, these are exciting moments of synchronicity. So I'd like to invite questions from the audience. So before that, I'd like to ask you, it's a water bottle question. So, you have executed this procedure on this song, and considering its gospel antecedents and its hymn, so will this kind of procedure, considering that you have employed a certain kind of archaeology of knowledge method of classification and deriving meaning from collecting and classification. So it's like a method of natural sciences. So will this method also work in any other song? So what about another song? No, I'm not asking you to respond immediately, but like for example, Schubert's Ave Maria, which has Latin text and it's translated to many languages, including Malayalam. So it was wonderful, Amarnath, to hear your Malayalam rendering of We Shall Overcome. So what about, so maybe Ave Maria doesn't have the kind of political import. So it's more about today as a moment of political gravity. That's what animates the song. But, as a methodology, it might apply for any other song, but the song is at the same time political and apolitical in the way it has been appropriated by various factions, including Trump supporters. One of the comments.
Yeah.
So I'm not asking you to respond to it, but it's a water bottle, because internet being that field where the synchronicity happens, and water bottle is a political field as well. Please share your questions. I invite all the audience members to please share your questions in the Q&A box.
Meanwhile, yeah, I mean, as the questions come, what you are also pointing towards is it's a very interesting provocation that's actually been with us also for a while. Because it is the fact that like the entire sort of spectrum starts to get like starts to appear in the way that the song is heard and sung and voiced. And I think possibly like the anatomical procedure in that sense that we are referring to, it's also like a kind of we are also looking at the futility of it by referring to that. And I mean, in that sense, sure, it can perhaps be performed on any other song, but I think for us, more than the song itself, even though the song is became the spine of today's exploration, it's the site of the comments that appear. It's the field of the comments, and in this case, the site of the comments for this particular song becomes a very kind of rich and thriving space for one to kind of investigate the history of the song itself and the moment at which it's sort of so with another song it might be something slightly different as well.
Yeah, I was thinking, actually, it's an interesting question. Actually, it did not start with We Shall Overcome, but actually looking at YouTube comments of songs that we see and recognizing that there is something profound and contradictory here, something is emerging. And then I think We Shall Overcome works so well because it is constantly slipping out of its own sort of character. The police also uses it, as you rightly said, so it's weightless in some sense, but it's also so powerful and so affective that it gets used by many different politics. And another song I thought, John, was recently, I think has for other reasons is Bella Ciao, the Italian song.
Ah,
That has that kind
from
of an
that
energy.
series.
Yeah, from the series, yeah.
Also, I think for us, over some time of the explorations, the question started to change and morph into an actual interest in this question of the we. And
Yeah.
that is contained in the song, and also the history of the song in terms of how the I becomes the we at the moment at which the I becomes the we. So that becomes a very open field of sort of, investigation.
Prerna YSK has a question for you, and it was something that even I was wondering about the impetus and where did this journey with this song start. So they say it's admirable and very interesting how there is a study of both semantics and phonetics. They have two basic questions. How did you both arrive at this exercise? And what was your personal relationship to experiences of will versus shall?
Oh my God. Suvani, go for it. I'll follow you.
I think it's actually during conversations that I think we arrived at it because I think there's a particular song. I think it was Milk and Honey or something.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the
Which,
origin story is
yeah.
basically Suvani and I were teaching together at NID and used to have sort of conversations on a regular basis. And I think we chanced upon this Jackson C. Frank song, Milk and Honey. And there was a comment that I paraphrased into 6 beers in lonely as a ghost hitting like a train, which I found was a haiku, which I found was one of the most tragic short poetic statements I've seen in a while. So from that, I think it developed. That is the start. And I think I would say this is something that has been in the background for us, no, Suvani? Among other things.
Yeah, in the sense that, it's consistently kept, I think, building and iterating, and I think the IFA Explorations grant in that sense has also been facilitating that process of continuous iteration, exploration. In that sense, even today becomes like a kind of an exploration of another form, and every iteration has led to more questions and ideas for the next form. So in some sense, I think it's that sort of a breadth that we are trying to kind of cover, but also with each iteration trying to go a little deeper into it. And the difference between the will and the shall is something that we are also struck by, in the sense that I think we didn't know, for instance, that I didn't know, for instance, that it was actually I will overcome, which got changed to we shall overcome in the way that we sing it now. So just encountering that snippet of trivia or history was interesting, in the sense of what are the different readings that we can make of it. And I think that process of readings is something that still goes on. And one of the things that we suggested in the session today was the sort of how the legalistic brings about a difference between the will and the shall. And I think that is something that's very interesting right now for us. Because, like, does the legalistic or the juridical in some sense start to inform the more colloquial and start to kind of infringe upon the idea of what understands as more colloquial and that appears as manifests in songs, etc., without us necessarily recognizing it. So I think maybe these are some of the questions that one can start to filter out. And
Actually, for me, sorry, Swani. Actually, for me, the relationship to the future, which I cannot actually define, that is the most interesting part in will and shall. Now, will kind of will is next indexes towards an extended future, but shall has some kind of an immediacy and a gravitas, I feel. Yeah, along with the legal idea.
yeah.
It's a comment that started it in the chat.
Yeah, I've just like a screenshot of the comment that started it. Yeah.
I'll just read out a question or a comment from Suganya Dev, who says, it's interesting to think about how the we is evoked as in through school assemblies and other forms of purposeful coincidental gatherings. We have heard the song through the singular voice, but not through the crowd, which is made possible through its simple, almost nursery rhyme-like structure. It's also one of those call and response songs where one starts to sing it, others are expected to join, kind of like virus, this song.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that the other day I was in fact asking a friend of mine who's a musician and asking him more about the structure of the song and why is it something that is so, that has this kind of a seductive appeal almost. And he was explaining to me this kind of an AB structure, which makes it really easy for anyone to sing. So anyone can become a singer in the song. It's almost like anyone can sort of join in, and at the same time it calls for many voices to kind of join in. The structure calls for it in some way.
And it's interesting that you share that because the Ave Maria, John, is harder to sing because of the way it's composed, right? So while it's very extremely accessible, like you're saying, everybody can embrace it.
The nursery rhyme structure, like so.
Yeah. Also, you referred in brief to iterations. Today was one such iteration. So I'm just curious, what else have you all experimented through this journey and process in terms of the research that you did in exploring the anatomy of the song?
I think one thing I want to note here, because it was also set in the premise of the explorations grant later, that we actually deliberately delayed any kind of, and still delaying any kind of final structure, as opposed to sort of project finalization, etc. It's just like iterating. So I think the initial idea started out perhaps as, okay, we have to do something about this, and then later conversations with friends, conversations together, looking at the research that we started to look at comments in a very meticulous form. So the archive itself was the first, the digital archive was the first form, I would say. And then we I think branched out and started to explore with our own immediate sort of occupational hazards. I started to screenshot photographs and make typologies from different parts of YouTube, while Suvani actually led this kind of anatomical operations on the song, the sound and the audio itself, and trying to make a rather anonymous chorus, like an eclectic chorus, which you heard parts of, and the screenshots also you would have seen as part of the lecture. Then later we tried to explore a book form, which is like a hybrid essay, which looked at the references, used screenshots as text, also our own reflection on the whole research and the song, etc. Yeah, I think these are some ideas. And then we also tried some very nascent artificial intelligence sort of videos, etc.
Yeah, where we would be feeding lyrics of the song and then seeing what's generated in terms of images and also in terms of sounds. And I think like it's also something that I'm not sure if we have gone into it enough so far, but personally, it's also I think on the side in parallel through the other work that's been going on. I've also been very interested in the idea of a chorus. And what constitutes a chorus, or how, like what is it that the chorus produces, and not just for the one who's singing it or voicing it, but also for someone who's listening to it. And I think in that sense this song is also kind of allows for that question to start to get fleshed out in many different ways. And other than that, I think this thing that started to also become really significant for us was this distinction between the singular sort of eclectic kind of very particular moments that the comments have, and which then turn into almost like these broader universal categories. So like it begins with something like, I remember my girlfriend when I hear this song, or something like that, and then it goes into like a whole range of comments, which then go all the way up to the countries, to the crisis that the country is going through. So that kind of like just the scales kind of collapsing in the duration of almost like a time code of the song that becomes the point at which something gets triggered. I think that's something that's been quite interesting for us, and that interest has been sustained, and I think it still probably needs to be, just teased apart quite a bit. Yeah.
I think just before I hand it to John, I think that was very interesting. The comments and and where the conversation then leads. I think that was very fascinating. And to be honest, I hadn't engaged with the song since being back in school. So when your project started, that's when it brought back all the memories. And then to see these comments and people engaging in such different, varied, emotional ways, the spectrum of emotion was very fascinating as well. So that excavation of the comments was, I think, has been an interesting revelation for us to see in this project.
There is a question from Dhruv Jani, who's a game designer and a former IFA grantee. Dhruv Jani is asking, your invocation of not just the comments about the song, but the comment section is fascinating. Seems to be a place where people can claim, demonstrate kingship to the song, and the song then seems to be carving out a space around itself, perhaps by the song's invocation of an anticipated but always deferred future.
Yeah, hi Dhruv, and yeah, thanks for the comment. And I think the claim is also the space that's been very interesting for us. So someone almost leaving a time code, saying 153. And leaving that in the comments in a way that one can click on the time code and go to that moment that activated something in that person. There is that sense of like um, a claim, in the sense of also what part of the song is claimed, but also what it ends up producing. And I think that's also where the anatomical operation also starts to suggest the fact that it cannot be anatomized, or it cannot be discretized. There's that kind of,
Yeah, because there is a lack of a corpus also, no? Somewhere the song actually goes into a space. Perhaps that is the space that Dhruv is speaking about, the space around itself, which actually then easily indexes it into COVID or whatever issue that it is trying to hold a space for. So that is very interesting. And I think personally for us, one of the points that we actually, like all of us using the internet, has sort of personally related to is also this kind of deferred future, the someday, the utopia, and the overcoming as this kind of accomplishment that has to be done over and over again. I mean, that thing was, that was also something that we have been, I think, starting to look at very closely.
Yeah, which John had also, I think, pointed out in one of our earlier conversations with him.
Yeah, and I found, Amarath, like John said, your translation in Malayalam, the two different words that were used had such two different journeys that the song was going to take the person through, right? So that also was very fascinating. Prerna has a follow-up comment, and it's a follow-up comment to Sukanya Dev's comment from earlier, which John read, on the recognition of it being the song being a hymn. Is it the element of preaching and mobilizing that has enabled its development into nursery rhymeness, fascist slogans? And also what John was suggesting, it is a contradictory song. So how do you negotiate these contradictions when performing, even embodying this song right now? So, I mean, maybe perhaps you want to respond, but I think it's more of a comment also in terms of where we place ourselves today and where the song is today.
No, I think these contradictions are very much where we why or where we see the our own kind of interest in the song. And when I think the question of embodying and performing it, today's context is also the first time that we attempted this kind of a form. And I think when we were thinking about the voicing of it, what we are voicing is all those different comments and all those different voices in the comments. There is no one version of the song that one can embody or perform. But the fact that it can be morphed into all these different ideas of the we is something that we want to kind of, yeah, cut open in a way with.
Yeah, I think I'll add that one resistance to this inherent contradiction is actually we trying to play certain historical exactitudes of the song, of the song's genealogy, of the songs, when it was translated, why it was translated, what was the context, who was it used by, etc. But at the same time, with the recognition that it was actually used for something that was actually as opposite as what it was used for in the beginning. So I think perhaps that is where the putting together. Yeah, Suvani?
Yeah, and also I think the other thing to do with the idea of the nursery rhyme structure is something that interestingly applies to both the song in the sacral space, the hymn, the gospel, all of that, other kinds of like religious songs, but it also applies equally to the protest song. So resistance music, protest songs, all also focus on a kind of structure that is easy to sing along to. And I think that's again where the historical transition of the song from starting off in the context of the gospel to then becoming a protest civil rights song to then being associated with the nationalist movements, all of that becomes like really sort of daunting. And I think the one thing that we are also interested in pursuing now is the fact that the earliest version of the song is recorded or like appears in around, like we mentioned in the performance, early 1900s. So what does that have to do with the larger political kind of milieu at that time? Like, how is it that the song comes together, like is almost like emerges at a moment where there is also a lot of the world is churning, and the emergence of some kind of a nation state border, um, etc., is starting to kind of also happen. So yeah.
There is a question from Shiraz Iqbal about the way Zoom architecture has impacted performativity. So Shiraz is saying, thank you so much for the rigor as well as the lightness of your exploration, Suvani and Amar. This is less a question than a comment. I mean something very specific by lightness while listening and watching. The failures of transmission, intervals of incomprehensibility or silence at different times. When you both began to speak at smaller intervals till your voices should have been overlapping were fascinating. This perhaps resulted from Zoom communication platform's code and its striving to transmit clearly one joinee's voice at a time, or the internet connection, or I also felt there was something rigorously productive in the way this lightness prevented your singing from coming together into the ecstatic, perhaps thought dissolving. Ecstatic chorus one expects to join usually while taking up the refrain, we shall overcome.
Yeah.
So the impossibility of the chorus on a platform like Zoom.
But also the phrase, I think that Shiraz has used the idea of the thought dissolving chorus, because one also sees the chorus as something that one blindly enters into, jumps into. And in that sense, I think it's interesting how on one hand the chorus can also start to produce a certain subjectivity. At the same time, it can also dissolve the subjectivity into like this idea of a crowd. And I think that to kind of be on Zoom, and which is anyway asynchronous, and uh, where the platform itself does not afford a kind of synchronicity of being in person and singing the chorus together. Yeah. So, I mean, in
Yeah.
that sense, I think it's interesting. It produces the ability to think again about what the chorus means and what the we could mean. Yeah.
Mm.
And also just, I think, responding, I mean, connected to what you said about the political dipti, Mehrotra also is sharing a comment where she says she's participated in singing the song in many, many women's movements. And Dipti, of course, has been involved very closely with that and theatre. And similar gatherings, say street theatre or grassroots NGOs. She thinks it would be really and interesting to further trace these kind of trajectories where, with grassroots organizations, street theater and movements. And here it's been in the Hindi version where she's based in Delhi. So she says, thank you for the presentation. Fascinating.
Okay.
Thank you, Dipti, for the comment.
Thanks, Deepthi.
No, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So if we don't have any more questions, shall we call it a day today?
Yeah, today.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic.
All
Yeah.
right.
I think before we part,
So-
we would like to thank IFA for such a fantastic platform, and allowing us to sort of explore and experiment. This has been really fun for us. Yeah, and I think in such a way that we try to hold the spirit of explorations grant further, and to do something that was not very logically sound or has had dissonances ingrained in it. Yeah. Suvani?
Yeah, no, I totally echo that. And thank you,
No,
John.
thank you
Thank
both as
you.
well. And I'm sure John has been working more closely with you, but it's also through your project, you've shown us the possibilities of what exploration can do and how it can open up so many different aspects and not having a specific outcome or a deliverable in that sense, outcome or product is quite interesting. So we would invite other artists to also look at our exploration category under arts practice, and very excited with all the experiments that happen through this category. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Menu. So before we conclude, there's an announcement. So our next project showcase will be on December 14th with Syed Sadiq about his art education project. So please follow IFA on all social media handles to get timely announcements. And I want to thank all of you who joined us today, asking questions and actively engaging with the conversation. It's been such a lively evening. And please join me in thanking Suvani Suri and Amarnath Praful, who joined from Germany for such an engaging lecture performance. And thank you, everyone, for such a lively day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.